Welcome to Uncaged Chaos. I'm Andy. This is a space for people who feel deeply, think endlessly, and are tired of shrinking themselves just to keep the peace. Here we talk about the psychology of healing, the nervous system behind our patterns, and what it actually looks like to come home to yourself without pretending you're fine when, in reality, you're not. If you've ever felt too much, too responsible, or quietly exhausted from carrying everyone else, you're in the right place. Being the main character doesn't mean dominating the narrative. It means you stop outsourcing your choices. You let other people have their arcs, their lessons, their own consequences. You stay in your lane and you trust that love doesn't require collapse. Because somewhere along the way, a lot of us got demoted in our own lives. We became the supporting character, the emotional support human, the one who reacts instead of chooses. Not because we're weak, not because we don't know better, but because survival taught us that staying connected mattered more than staying aligned. Today, we're talking about what it actually means to be the main character in your own story. Not in the performative center of the universe way, but in a grounded, nervous system aware, deeply human way. Because being the main character doesn't mean controlling the plot. It means you stop abandoning yourself just to keep the story moving. When we say you are the main character in your own story, we're not saying other people don't matter. We're saying you stop living like your role is to keep everyone else regulated while you disappear in the background. Because for a lot of people, that disappearing started early. If you grew up in a home where emotions were big, volatile, and unsafe and unpredictable, you learned that love wasn't automatic. It was something you maintained. You became the peacekeeper, the translator, the emotional shock absorber. So, of course, adulthood feels very confusing and overwhelming. And of course, boundaries feel wrong. And of course, saying no triggers guilt. Because choosing yourself feels like you're doing something bad. Your nervous system doesn't remember boundaries as empowerment. It remembers them as an abandonment risk. Which is why stepping into main character energy doesn't feel bold at first. It feels destabilizing. Because you're not just changing behavior, you're stepping out of a role that once kept you connected and felt safe. So you are the main character in your own story, but other people are the main characters in their stories. And the moment we forget that, we don't reclaim agency. We try to control outcomes. Agency isn't about making people behave differently. It's about deciding what roles you're available to play. Boundaries aren't walls. They're just editorial decisions. They're you saying, I'm not rewriting myself to stay in this scene. We have all been there. You're in a friendship or a relationship where the dynamic has always been the same. They vent, you listen. They spiral, you stabilize. They avoid accountability, you soften the edges so no one feels uncomfortable. And one day you realize you are exhausted. Physically, emotionally, mentally, done. Not because you care too much, but because you've been playing a supporting role in someone else's emotional storyline. So you try something new. You don't rescue. You don't over-explain. You don't preemptively soothe. You say, I care about you, but I can't keep showing up this way. And suddenly there is tension. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped following a script they wrote. And this is why it feels so hard. Because people-pleasing isn't a personality trait. It's a learned survival response. For many people, it starts early, especially if you grew up in that home we talked about earlier, where the emotional stability depended on you. If your parents were overwhelmed, unpredictable, emotionally immature, or unavailable, you learned something very young. Your needs were secondary. Your job was to keep the peace. You became the emotional regulator, the mood reader, the one who knew when to soften, when to stay quiet, when to make things better. Not because you were asked to explicitly, but because the cost of not doing so, it felt like abandonment. So your nervous system linked safety to connection, and that connection to performance. Now, fast forward to adulthood. When you set a boundary now, your body doesn't interpret it as healthy self-respect. It interprets it as risk. That's why boundaries can feel wrong at first, why guilt rushes in. What you might feel selfish, cold, dramatic, or even like a bitch for simply saying no. And it's not because you're doing something bad, but because your nervous system remembers a time when pulling back meant losing love. For some with abandonment wounds, boundaries don't feel like clarity. They feel like a threat to attachment. Your body isn't asking, is this fair? It's asking, will I be left if I stop managing everyone's emotions? That sensation isn't intuition, it's memory. And here's the part most people miss. When you people please, you're not actually creating safety. You're creating a familiar role. You're staying small so others can stay close. You're choosing predictability over authenticity. And when you stop people pleasing, it can feel like you're doing something cruel, even when you're just trying to be honest. But you're not taking anything away. You're actually returning responsibility. You're giving people back their emotions, their reactions, and their chance to self-regulate. And you're finally letting yourself step out of the role you were never meant to carry forever. Now, before we go any further, let's slow this down for a second. If your chest just tightened, or you felt defensive, sad, or exposed, that makes sense. Nothing here is asking you to rip the pattern out overnight. Just take a breath. Unclench your jaw, and let your shoulders drop a little bit. You're not in danger right now. You're not being abandoned for hearing this. This is just awareness, not an ultimatum. Now, boundaries aren't about controlling outcomes. They're about offering information. What others choose to do with that information is their work. Discomfort isn't cruelty. It's just growth. Stepping back isn't abandonment. It's non-interference. So this is how this shows up in people pleasing. People pleasing is what happens when survival masquerades as kindness. When you people please, you remove other people's autonomy. You decide they can't handle disappointment. You decide that they need to be protected from their feelings, that their growth would be too hard for them. That's not kindness. That's control disguised as care. And it keeps everyone frozen in their roles. You're not trying to be liked. You're trying to stay attached. And when you imagine setting a boundary, your body jumps ahead of the moment. You predict disappointment, assume rejection, rehearse being too much or too cold or too difficult. But here's the quiet truth. Most people aren't thinking about you the way you think they are because they're thinking about themselves, their stress, their story. You are not the main character in their narrative. And paradoxically, that's what gives you your agency back. Because the moment you stop pre-editing yourself for reactions that haven't even happened yet, you stop outsourcing your nervous system to other people. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, but if I don't do all of this, everything will fall apart. I want you to hear this sentence very clearly. If everything falls apart when you stop regulating it, it was never stable. It was being propped up by you. That does not make you powerful. It makes you overextended. And stepping back doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're no longer volunteering to be the load-bearing wall in everyone else's life. People are allowed to struggle. They're allowed to feel uncomfortable. They're allowed to learn how to regulate themselves. And when you stop intervening prematurely, you're not abandoning them. You're giving them dignity of their own growth. Now let's talk about boundaries. Boundaries are about what you do, not what you expect others to do. It's not, you need to stop. But if this continues, I'm stepping away. Boundaries don't require agreement. They require follow through and consistency. Sometimes a boundary is not responding right away. Sometimes it's leaving earlier. Sometimes it's saying, hey, I don't have the capacity for this right now. And sometimes the boundary is simply internal. You feel the urge to rescue and you pause. That pause is a boundary. So let's stop outsourcing change. If you're the main character in your own story, what are you outsourcing change to someone else? Why are you waiting for them to shift before you give yourself peace? That's not agency. That's hope with your nervous system attached. Main character energy is deciding what happens next for you. So where are you playing the role that feels exhausting but familiar? Who benefits when you stay in that role? What part of you believes that love must be earned? Where might you underestimate someone by not being honest? Being the main character doesn't mean controlling the narrative. It means choosing yourself. Main character energy isn't loud. It isn't selfish. It isn't cutting people off dramatically. It's quiet consistency. It's choosing what you do even when others are uncomfortable. It's letting people respond however they need to. It's trusting that connection built on honesty is safer than connection built on performance. If you're going to be uncomfortable anyway, you might as well be uncomfortable as yourself, because you were never meant to carry everyone else's emotional storyline. You are the main character in your own life. They are the main characters in theirs. Some relationships will deepen, some will fall away, but that is not failure. It's just simply a plot shift. Uncaged chaos isn't reckless. It's regulated freedom. It's choosing truth over performance, alignment over approval, agency over familiarity. It's letting life be a little messy because it's finally yours. And if you've spent your entire life inside that cage, take this as permission. You don't have to kick the door open. You can just stop standing in front of it. So if you've ever felt too much, too responsible, or too tired of carrying everyone else's storyline, this space is for you. This is Uncaged Chaos, where we choose ourselves because being human might be hard, but it's the whole fucking point.